All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Dunk on AP. Today we're going to be dunking on AP World, and we're going to be talking about developments in South and Southeast Asia from 12 to 1400. So, without further ado, let's go dunk on AP World. All right, so of course, whenever we're talking about South Asia, generally we're going to be talking about India. We're going to be talking a lot about the Indian Ocean basin, okay? You can't talk India without talking about Hinduism, which was and still is the primary religion in India. Buddhism, of course, is created in India, but it's going to diffuse really more so a little bit north in Asia, to places like China and Tibet, and places like that. So, in general, Islam is going to arrive a little bit later, is going to clash with Hinduism in India in a lot of ways. Hinduism is polytheistic, whereas Islam is monotheistic. Hinduism has all kinds of religious imagery and idols that are forbidden in Islam. And Hinduism has a caste system, whereas Islam on paper is going to preach equality of all believers. So Hinduism has a lot of sacred texts, whereas Islam only has the Quran. So when these two societies bump into each other, and are really having to coexist in a lot of ways, this is going to cause problems. So, leading up to 1200 in South Asia, when we were talking about India, Hinduism is the dominant religion that drives culture and social hierarchy with the caste system that is very patriarchal. Popular Hinduism develops in response to Buddhism. Now, frequent invasion by the White Huns dissolved the Gupta Empire in 550 AD into regional rule. Some invaders incorporate into the warrior caste and create new local ruling classes. Collectively, they're known as the Rajput. India continues to be an economic power despite no real centralized rule because of its great location on the Indian Ocean until the 16th century. So, whereas you see a more centralized rule in China, not totally centralized at this time with the Song dynasty, and then you see the Abbasid Caliphate ruling over Dar al-Islam, you don't have as centralized of a rule in India. It's going to be a little bit more split up in the years 1200 to 1450. But moving back a little bit, King Harsha from 606 to 648 temporarily restored unified rule from 606 to 648 in most of northern India through conquest. He was Buddhist, but he was tolerant. He could not overcome the fragmentation of India and was eventually assassinated. Islam spreads through conquest and conversions and took over the region of Sindh up until the collapse of the Abbasid dynasty in 1258. Islam also spread to coastal regions in northern and southern India through merchants. Big thing to understand there. Islam glorifies merchants in a lot of ways because Muhammad was one. They formed small communities and played a prominent role in Indian business and commercial life. They also spread through Turkish-speaking migrants from Central Asia. So you've got Muhammad of Ghazni, who was a Muslim leader of Turks in Afghanistan, who annexed several states and destroyed the Somnath Hindu temple of Gujarat in a campaign against Hindu and Buddhist faiths. So, with the arrival of Islam in India in the 7th century, in the 600s, remember it's always a little bit back from where you think it's going to be, they begin making Hindus convert, but find that that isn't working so well. What they actually get more success with Islam is going to have more success in Hinduism, in India, with Muslim merchants moving to port cities on the Indian Ocean and intermarrying with Hindu wives who convert to Islam. They also, what they find is that they get the Hindus of the low caste on the Indian caste system, but they weren't successful in changing the caste system. Also, they win over Buddhists after greatly weakening the religion in the region. So, what you get in northern India from the 13th to the 16th century, from the 1200s to the 1500s, is the Sultanate of Delhi, or the Delhi Sultanate. It was the principal Muslim power in North India from the 13th to the 16th century. You may notice I keep mentioning regions of India and not India in general. Something to remember: India is huge. At this point, nobody seemed to be able to dominate all of it, okay? So Islam is introduced in the north by the Abbasid and further furthered by Turkish innovations from Central Asia. Eventually, they consolidate their raiding territories into the Sultanate of Delhi. They rule northern India from 1206 to 1526. It was a big army, but they mostly stayed where they were and did not conquer. It had a relatively weak administrative structure, and it had a reliance on local Hindu practices, but 19 out of 35 sultans are going to be assassinated. So the Muslim takeover of a Hindu state, if you recall, the Muslims put a tax on people who did not convert to Islam. Hopefully, you remember this was called the jizya, a tax imposed by the Delhi Sultanate on on all of their non-Muslim subjects. It really the interaction between Islam and Hinduism dominates the political history of the Sultanate of Delhi, or the Delhi Sultanate. Like I said, India is huge and hard to govern, so local kingdoms are going to have a much bigger say in India. Many Hindus view the Muslims as foreign outsiders, which is understandable. The southern part of India tends to be a little bit more peaceful. You've got the Delhi Sultanate in northern India, but you've got more decentralized southern part of India. It was a little more powerful, but mostly Hindu. You've got the Chola Kingdom, more unified by. A more unified kingdom from 850 to 1267 over on the Coromandel coast. Big traders with a great navy. If they're living on the coast of India, they are certainly going to be using the Indian Ocean to trade, just a general rule. Then you've got the Vijayanagar Empire, which is really the kingdom of Vijayanagar, which was the other dominant kingdom in southern India, northern Deccan, from 1336 to 1565. This Hindu kingdom had good trade with Muslims and eventually fell to an alliance with Muslims in 1565. Trade in the Indian Ocean, though, is so massively important. It's going to forge links with other regions and it's going to make southern India flourish economically. Big thing to remember there. India and the Middle East share many societal developments with each other. Remember, this is all about connections. One of the things that India and the Middle East share with each other is astronomy and math. And Qutb Minar was an example of blended Hindu and Islam architecture, a place you can still go visit, built by the Delhi Sultanate, and it was a elaborate mosque on top of a Hindu temple. Then you've got Urdu, which was a new language developed among Muslims living in India that blended Hindi and Arabic. Then you've got the Bhakti movement. This was similar to Sufi Muslims, but with a Hindu twist. The Bhakti movement focused on emotional connections to one particular Hindu deity. Remember, um, that India is on the Indian Ocean. It's going to be greatly influenced by it's going to greatly influence Southeast Asia. The countries that make up modern day Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam through trade. The region was mostly Buddhist, but controlling it meant you influenced trade between South Asia and East Asia. So then you've got the Srivijaya Empire from 670 to 1025. This was a Hindu kingdom based on Sumatra. It was a sea-based kingdom. They had a strong navy that got rich by charging ships traveling between India and China. Again, if you want to do sea trade between China and the Middle East or wherever else, you have to go through India, just geographically speaking for the most part. Then you've got the Majapahit Kingdom, another sea-based kingdom from 1293 to 1520. It was based on Java and had 98 tributaries at its height. It sustained power by controlling sea lanes. It was a Buddhist kingdom. So you've got the land-based kingdoms. You've got the Khmer Empire. It was situated along the Mekong River. Not trade, but irrigation and drainage allowed the kingdom to grow rice and prosper. Angkor Thom was the capital. It was forced out by the Sukhothai kingdom in 1431. So understand a big thing with India as they are talking about trade. They are going to be trading interregionally, of course, and they're going to be doing a lot of it through sea routes or through land routes, but also by sea routes. They're going to be trading a lot of things like textiles, beads, gold, silver, metal goods, and ritualistic objects. And this is just going to be the primary things that they're trading. But you have to remember that India, in so many ways, is going to be influenced by Islam at this time, and that blend, and that fight, and that tension between Islam and Hinduism is going to really be the story of India from 1200 to 1450. And of course, at this time, India may not have invented the lateen sail and the rudder, but they do certainly revolutionize and use it a lot, and that makes sea trading much easier. And so they're also going to have Silk Road trade. And so India is so massively important at this time. So hope you've enjoyed Duncan on History. See you guys next time.